specifically to our next speaker, who, let me focus on, Kelly Dugan. All right, let me just say a couple of words before I hand everything over to her. So Dr. Kelly P. Dugan's interests are equity, pedagogy, and multicultural education in classics. Her dissertation that she just completed this semester, congratulations, Kelly, is titled Anti-Racism and Restorative Justice in Classics, Race, Slavery, and the Function of Language in Beginning Greek and Latin Textbooks. She is moving to Hartford, Connecticut in 2 weeks to start her new position as a visiting assistant professor in the Classical Studies Department at Trinity College. Today, she is here to share her dissertation research with us, and here's the title of her talk today: Anti-Racism and Restorative Justice in Classics Pedagogy, Race, Slavery, and the Function of Language in Beginning Greek and Latin Textbooks. Take it away, Kelly.
Okay, and you can just give me a thumbs up from the panelists that that the screen is shared.
Yes, you might want to just, yeah, good.
Yeah, there we go.
And just last thing from me, the slides, Kelly's slides are on the website, so if you want to look at them yourself on your own device, you can go find it there.
Yes, I slightly edited them, but not much at all. So, okay, so I'm excited to be talking about my dissertation research, and today's goals are, I'm going to talk to you about the problem, of course, the research questions, the data set that I use, the theory and methodology, and the findings and implications. So sounds like I'm telling you about a dissertation, right? So I just want to walk you through it. And my hope is that you get really interested in what you're hearing and you want to learn more. Please email me. My email address is here, my new one. Or you can still email me at University of Georgia for a little while, but, and you can email me and request a copy of the dissertation. I'm more than happy to share. I want as many people to read this as possible. So what is the problem? Okay, so this is how I've summed up what we're talking about here. White supremacists have historically relied on classics to help socially construct racism. Classics has continued to foster racism in different contexts across time and place. Racism is now embedded in classics teaching practices and materials. And the enslavement narratives in Greek and Latin textbooks are part of a legacy of racist ideas. So thinking about acknowledging the problem and then moving on to discussing the problem, I think it's really important that we know what definitions we're operating with here. So there are many definitions of race and racism, just as there are many definitions of critical race theory. Brett talked about critical race theory. I think it's really important to establish yourself. What perspective are you coming from? Who are you aligning with? And how are they defining these things? So I'm heavily influenced by Ibram X. Kendi, who Ian had mentioned earlier, is the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and 2016's Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America. And that's a pretty large book, but it's also available on Audible, and I highly recommend getting that. So according to Ibram X. Kendi, and the definitions that really resonate with me here are: a racist is one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction, or expressing a racist idea. And anti-racist is one who is supporting anti-racist policy through their action or inaction, or through their action rather, through their action or expressing anti-racist ideas. So we got the definition. We understand a bit of the problem and how we're approaching it, but what about the history of it? I think it's so important to have, at the very minimum, a basic idea of what does classics have to do with the discussion of racism and the formation of racism. So I just broke it down to these three elements here. We have early ideas, that is proto-racism. And I gave one example to right there, environmental determinism. And you can look to Xenophon, Aristotle, and others for that. So we have the proto-racist ideas, concepts of difference, but not institutionalized racism. But then we get institutionalized racism over the course of centuries of social construction. And so I have continued social construction. And I put Henry the Navigator on there, who is Portuguese human trafficker of the 15th century. And his biography is identified currently as the earliest written evidence, solid evidence for institutionalized discrimination based on race, that is racism. And so he Africa that was economically beneficial for enslavement and justified the targeting of Black Africans on the basis of their inferiority. And the author of that biography is De Zurara, and I think we have a lot of work we can do in understanding that aspect of the history and how classics inform the ideas that justify this racism. And then, of course, we have ongoing and ever-changing, I say ever-changing, gonna edit that one, ever-changing manifestations today. And I put as some examples voting rights and gerrymandering and things that target community. And I live here in Athens, Georgia, currently a large Black population that has been especially targeted by gerrymandering and voter laws. So a basic history is always good. I highly encourage much more. The first couple chapters of my dissertation really go into this and have lots of resources for how to learn more and new areas that we really need to develop our understanding of, and how classics is involved in the formation of racism. Oh, did not mean to do that. Okay, so now the cultural context, narrowing the scope a little more. I have here a poster. Images are really important. I'm going to talk more about that. And this is from the Charlottesville Unite the Right, the deadly rally that occurred. And you see here SPQR flag and the symbolism used by the white supremacists. And so we have white supremacists using classics imagery. We have classics housing white supremacists, as we talk about Paideia Institute and many other, that's not only there, it's all over. And then we have the interwoven relationship between classics and white supremacy that continues today. So that is the cultural context. Now we're going to narrow it even further to the classroom, the situational context. So classroom materials, especially textbooks, are part of the problem. The enslavement discourse in these textbooks are particularly egregious. And I don't normally like to put this much words on my slides, but I thought it would be really helpful for you to read it, and especially since this is being shared, you are free to, to use this information and return back to it. But a comparison to 19th century American texts and images show how false portraits of slavery are a tool of white supremacists. And many classics textbooks promote these same false portraits of a happy slave and benevolent system of enslavement. Although ancient enslavement was not race-based, the presentation of Greco-Roman enslavement today is racist. And I want to repeat that again. Although ancient enslavement was not race-based, the presentation of Greco-Roman enslavement today is racist. And I'm going to talk about how that is. So how is it that the textbooks are engaging in what are now racist discourses today in their support and sanitizing and normalization of enslavement? So here are my research questions. These are the official research questions. I will reinterpret them in a moment, but how are interpersonal and ideational meaning systems being used to construe enslavement discourses within Greek and Latin textbooks? So in other words, how are the authors choosing to construe the characters that they're featuring in the textbook? And not only how are they representing them? How are they describing them, their feelings, their emotions? But how are they interacting with one another? Who has agency? And how can a linguistic analysis bring out a better understanding of the framing or ideation of these characters?